We're back with In Your Best Interest. As promised, we're doing our spring cleaning your marriage, and we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not we did what we said we're going to do about our goals, or maybe we just are not going to talk about that. But the reality is, I want to talk a little bit on this episode about what the spring cleaning looks like, because we talked right after the New Year's New Me. So this is a segue from that last podcast, and I hope this really helps.
Yeah, so I mean, the first part I want to dive into here is that we all know marriage is hard. I think we've all experienced that in our lives, but some people just call it quits without trying to fix things, without taking any steps there. So, well, some people probably need to get a divorce. Can you help talk some of those people that are kind of teetering there? Can you help talk them off the ledge?
I think one of the things that we highlight the most is just because we're divorce attorneys, I don't like divorce. I in fact hate it. I really want people to stay together. And one of the challenges I go into when I think about when I meet my maker at the pearly gates, hopefully, is were you the facilitator of divorce? Were you the person that was encouraging it, or were you really trying to keep people together? I know I can say now in this stage of my career, I really do try to make sure that if we can, we fix some of the problems and provide some solutions. And sometimes that includes filing for divorce. I mean, if somebody's just not making any kind of progress in not holding themselves accountable and always blaming the other side, sometimes they need that reality check of filing for divorce. I definitely believe that this time of year, until we get to spring, usually when the weather's worse, honestly, you just kind of cooped up and you feel like you're not making any significant changes. It's kind of that weird time until spring hits, where it's like everything's just kind of sitting idle and nothing's hibernation mode. That's a good one, Mary. So I think the best way to answer that question is to say, like, let's really pull back the curtain. Let's remember that life is full of seasons. And the one that's coming up is generally the most uplifting. And so don't just jump into it because you're at a stale point. It needs to, in my mind, you need to really look back, and we talked about that checklist of the do's and don'ts and the non-negotiables. If those non-negotiables are getting worse and they're adding more to it, we need to look at spring cleaning. We really do. Because when that sun really comes up and you're out and about and everything you do is wrong, and no matter what steps you're making to make your marriage better, they just keep kicking you while you're down, that's not right.
Mm-hmm. I want to tie we alluded to this in the previous podcast too, but Reader's Digest, I don't even know if they publish that thing anymore, but they used to have a column called "Can This Marriage Be Saved?" Remember that? So how do people assess their situations regarding whether or not they can be saved or not?
I think I get that question quite a bit. Like, I don't really want a divorce. I just am getting information, and I do love those calls. They're some of my favorite consults, because when I talk about putting people together, I don't do anything. It's a God thing, right? All I do is kind of like a counselor does, ask some questions and make them think. And so when you talk about how do you assess, it's not like you have this Excel spreadsheet and you're checking off, did they work out on a Tuesday? Did they drink on a Wednesday? Did they come and take the child to school? You shouldn't be like that regimented. I'm sure there's people out there that are, and that's probably why they're making the phone call in the first place. But I think it's important to really understand what makes you tick and your non-negotiables. And, if somebody is continuously, being violent, that's an obvious. If they're continuously using cruel treatment, continuously belittling you, continuously undermining your parenting ability, not checking themselves with finances, not going to do the work if you're a spiritual person to go to church, and in fact undermining that, undermining your family, like the significant values that you have or should have going into a marriage, those are the ones where it's really identifiable and you can make a checklist. You don't have to have it written down, but you can make a mental checklist, and I think it's important to go back to
I mean, for me, there's lots of things. There's the trust. If the trust is gone, you can't trust the other person anymore. The person leaves the house and you have uneasy about the person not coming home at night. So the trust, not being honest about finances, things like that are important. If you're always unhappy, I think, if you're constantly unhappy, my father told me, I was very young, he said, if it's more than 50% unhappiness, you need to really take a good look at this. If you're sometimes unhappy, okay, but if you feel like you're more than 50% unhappy in your marriage, it might not be the right place for you. Again, you have to do more things. Resentment, I think, is a big piece. If there's no understanding for the other side and resentment builds, that's a time for, I think you need to take a hard look at yourself and a hard look at the other person. Intimacy doesn't exist anymore, or is not there. That's important in a marriage if that doesn't exist anymore. And I think another one that's important, what do your loved ones say about you? Are you in which space you are? Because if you have people around you that keep telling you you don't look happy or you don't look good or are you happy, constantly ask you that, that's also because we can kind of like push that up under the carpet because you're so busy with life and work. But if other people start noticing that you're in the wrong spot, I think that's the time when you really need to look at your marriage, I think.
Yeah, I had this really neat lady. She called me about 2 months ago. And literally one of the sweetest, most wholesome. She was just in tears. She's like, I don't believe in divorce. This is against my spiritual, but I don't know what else to do. I've tried to go to counseling. I've tried to play pickleball with him. I've tried to go to the gym. I've tried to go to trips and all the things that we talk about. Like, you do life, and if you've got somebody rowing alongside of you, that's the person you need to continue life with. Now, nothing is cupcakes and butterflies in any form of relationship, but I do think that it's really important. In that specific instance with her, she very much beat herself down so much for so many years that she didn't even realize what an awesome woman she was. And it kind of pisses me off because I'm like, if this was your sister, you would go, hell no. This guy is a total prick. He's beat you down. He's kept you in a cage on finances when they have millions of dollars. And she's just like, well, I don't spend much. And I was like, what's not much? She's like, I mean, maybe like $3,000 or $4,000 a month. These people have millions, and I know that that's different for everybody. But he's got her kind of off to the side. He's running around. You know, he's always gone. He's doing whatever he wants to do. And she's the punching bag and feels just like everything's normal.
But I mean, I guess it has to do with how you've been raised. Like, I mean, for me, it was for better or worse. So that means there are going to be times that's worse. And then if you raised like that, I was raised like that, you just don't call it quits. You make it work. But then if you try to make it all the work from your side, I've been in that situation. I've honestly been in that same situation where I felt the other part is not doing it. So I just got to hold the fort and hold on to this because there's kids involved and everything. You don't want to just let it go. That's how I've been raised. So I'm in the same situation. But that's why I said, when your other friends, family start seeing, and they should speak up, when they see how you become a shell of yourself and how you're not the same person, then it's time to leave. But it's not easy if you have that mindset. I think it's not easy.
But you said something earlier, like your dad said, if you're not happy 50% of the time, you need to take a
hard look at your marriage. Because life is too short. I mean, if you are feeling most of the time, 60, 70% of the time that you're not happy and you just have those spurts of where it's good, then something is off.
So in that situation where the effort's there, like, to me, effort, if you've got 50% of the time, I'm going to break that down. If you're putting in 100% of the effort on your side and then the other side's 50% effort, I don't know that your dad would tell you, hey, you need to stay in that situation forever.
No, it's not. You know it's not the effort. I agree. That's not the effort. It's like how you feel. If you feel most of the time it's not right, if you feel most of the time there's distrust, there's dishonesty, that we don't talk, the finances, if it's more than, again, if you look at every day, if 4 or 5 days out of the week you feel like crap or it's not good, the 1 or 2 days that you maybe go out and have fun, that's not enough for you. That's because again, then you have more than half the time you're not going to be good. And I always felt to the kids, if you have kids involved, what example are you setting for your kids? If you are unhappy, you don't have to say anything to the kids. You can be away and never even fight or argue in front of the kids. Kids are very smart. I mean, I always say, like, don't stay together for the kids. The kids know. You should stay together when you have kids, and you should try much, much harder when you have kids to stay together. But you don't have to fight or argue. They know exactly what's going on. Kids have a sense for that. So that's why I said 50%.
And I think kind of in the situation that you're talking about, the other party is not really wanting to do any heavier lifting to make things work. They're happy with the way things are. They're living the life they want to live them. So how do you know if that person is going to be receptive to change? I mean, because there's marriage counseling and there's all that kind of stuff. So kind of what's the process there to kind of figure out if there's going to be some ways to make changes?
I think direct communication is the most critical thing. Andrea told me about this guy that all he does is talks about communication styles. But, you know, when you've been beaten down or put in a corner over and over, again, it's really hard to be direct.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't pretend to be able to, in one podcast or whatever, talk through how you can do that. But the easiest way in my mind about direct communication is really write down your non-negotiables and be able to just rehearse them directly to the individual. And I don't even care if you hide a recorder in your pocket because you need reassurance. I tell people all the time, these timelines, they read through them and it's therapeutic because it's like, oh my gosh, this actually was crazy. Like Valentine's and Christmas and birthdays, and I'm not allowed to have my family around, and all of these things. Like when you read your story back to yourself, it's much easier to know that you're not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're one of those people struggling with direct communication, you really do write down, and I don't care if you do practice it in your bathroom mirror. I'm going to be strong today, and I'm going to say, hey, you've been gone for 2 weeks doing X, Y, and Z. We can't do that as a family. I don't need a counselor to tell me that. This is a non-negotiable. I want date night on Thursday. Put down the solutions, not just the problem, but the solutions. And you can start small, and you'll see your confidence begin to come back to you. And that's really 90% of the reason we do this job is watch people at their weakest point get to their strongest. It's a cool transition when that happens.
Yep, for sure. So people who want to make things work, what would their first step be?
I think you break down, and Andrea, you chime in here. I think you break down what is really in your mind that you feel is broken. And like we always talk about, make the list and then shorten it, okay? So as far as the brokenness of, the first thing to make something better is to identify what's broken and try to come up with alternative solutions. So it doesn't have to be, you need to do this exactly. You give a this or that. I love this or that scenarios. And really think outside of your own box. I love when people say, hey, you say these things to me. How can I make it to where you're not so frustrated at me? What can I do? Right? And just listen to their response back, because you're going to know pretty quickly, like someone's true heart. If their response is, well, you're just a da-da-da-da-da, and they just keep going, okay, I understand what you just said. Well, so how do I change that? And just keep pressing them on the how questions and the why questions. And you'll hear pretty quickly, I think, what things you really need to focus on. And that's just from the communication style. I mean, obviously, if there are issues with finance, maybe it is, hey, listen, I don't really feel very secure in the event something happens to you or I, and I want to make sure our kids are taken care of. So can we go, I need to get more financially savvy. Call me the dumb kid, right? Fall on your own sword and then just play like the little humble person for a minute. And what you might find is that they go, no, you're not going to see our bank accounts, and they're going to keep saying the same stuff when it's not even about you. It's not even control about you. And then you're like, okay, wait a minute. I don't know if we can fix this. And so exposing those flaws, I think.
And what is underlying, like I said earlier, when you have resentment, I think what is really underlying those issues that we have? What issues do we have? Do we argue all the time? Do we don't spend enough time together? Whatever it is, what is my underlying issue? And what's potentially the underlying, his or her underlying issues. So what you said, I think, is good to really put this on the table, figure out what the main things are, and then see where the action is taken on the other side. I think but I think the most important, the actions has to be taken. If you have somebody, for example, that gets hammered every night, and I have an issue with that, then we need to find a solution. They don't have to be cold, or what do you guys do in January?
Well,
so I don't do that.
Dry January.
Yeah, dry
Mary.
January.
That didn't work out for
Mary,
me.
what happened to us? We're supposed to be reporting all our accolades.
Okay, I failed.
So what I mean, if that's
2 weeks.
2 weeks, or at least. So, but I mean, if that's an issue for me, that the other one drinks too much, then or they complain that I drink too much, you can't expect stuff overnight to happen. But if it's a non-negotiable, because one of the two doesn't want to be married to an alcoholic, because it can easily lead to that, then I need to see some action taken. If they can't do it by themselves, then they need to seek help. But then action has to be taken. And if the answer is always, I got it under control, I can do it, and then next party you go to, they get hammered again or get hammered in front of the TV at night, I mean, there is only so much you can take where you need to say that's it.
Yeah, that's a good segue of like when we talk about giving options. So, for example, we get the alcohol stuff happen a lot in our business, you can imagine, alcohol, drugs, and everything else. But specifically alcohol, when it comes to solutions, you don't just put the hard demand on you must stop drinking tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
or else,
exactly.
Right?
That's not
Because
gonna work.
you're or else, you better be ready to do the or else. So what I encourage clients to do is say, all right, Tuesday night, go find an activity. Let's do tennis or some whatever. And you say, hey, I want to go with you to play tennis on that night. By operation of a physical activity, it's going to prevent some of the things that you're concerned about, potentially.
Unless you get hammered
Unless
afterwards.
you get hammered at the tennis or afterwards, which sometimes you need to. But for real, if it's a serious problem in that regard, and you're putting forth alternative solutions that are fun, like I think a lot of people in those situations are like, well, hell, what am I supposed to do? I'm not just going to sit here with you and stare at the wall. That's weird, right?
Mhm.
So be thinking for yourself, like, how can I make this more fun? How can I, add activities to the list? And I think that when you do that, and you're trying, you're giving all that effort, you're going to see real quickly what you should do and whether you're going to make progress.
Yeah, and in the previous podcast too, we talked about those boundaries and then also having consequences to those boundaries. So, and I think you covered that pretty well. And I'd like you to just touch on that again, Andrea, because you.
Yeah, I mean,
talked
you
about
have to.
that.
There has to be a consequence, just like with your kids. If you tell your kids don't do that, or if you don't clean your room, X is going to happen. I think in a relationship, it has to be the same thing. If you decide not to come home, guess what? You're sleeping on the couch, right? And that happens every night. Then that's the consequence. Or then whatever you want to come up with. If you drink, then this is going to happen. But you have to have a consequence, because otherwise you're going to be a pushover. And my sons actually told me this, which I thought is so wise from them. They said, if as a man, and this is not cliche or anything, but my son said, is if you as a woman let a guy do something, guys tend to push a little further next time. And if you let it go again, then they push a little further and a little further. It's probably the other way around, the same thing. But that hard line has to be insane. There has to be a consequence. If you tell the kids don't clean your room, and there's nothing happening, they're not going to clean the room. Like, for what? There's nothing. Mama's just going to be a little upset, and then we go back to business. And I think in a marriage it's the same thing. You have to, non-negotiables. If you cross that line, then this is going to happen. Like you said, the finances. You don't give me access to the finances. We have a serious trust, and finances are, as you know, the biggest ones, right? If I can't have access to the finances, then that's not a marriage. There's no trust there.
Yeah, I'd like to soften the word consequences to accountability. Just from a standpoint of we're saying the same things, but accountability and saying, hey, listen, I really told you this was my concern for our family, and I don't know anything about the finances. I've kind of got my head buried in the sand, and it's really making me scared and insecure, and I'm really fearful. So, accountability is saying, I am fearful. And, for example, if you're just sleeping on the couch, well, if he's like, well, hell, I get to go out and stay out all night and I'm just sleeping on the couch, cool. Like, sometimes the accountability is not even there because the consequences is what we're really talking about are not strong enough, or they don't escalate, or they're not consistent. You have those kids and you discipline them really well for like a day or
Twice,
two.
and then you don't.
And then the next week they're like, oh, cool, she quit worrying about
Oh,
discipline.
she's busy. Yeah.
Right? So I think accountability and going back to those, if you're forgetting or you're having trouble keeping people or holding yourself accountable, those lists and just setting a time on your calendar to like go back and do a self-check. Did I actually schedule some activities? Do some self-internalization checks
For
too.
sure, yeah.
Did I do these things? Am I just getting mad about things that I did not make myself or the other person accountable
Correct.
for? That's not fair.
Yeah.
Right?
It goes
Right.
both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that does go both ways too.
Both ways.
So it's like it takes two to make a marriage great or not so great, right? So you have to.
Yeah.
be
You can't
accountable
be the only
yourself.
one bitching and complaining, and the changes the other person wants you don't take into consideration. Yeah, I totally agree.
So most people say we get married for better or worse. You talked about that earlier, Andrea. But how do you know that you're at that point, Justin, when it's like it's just not going to work? And we kind of talked about this earlier. And then that really it's time to file.
Yeah, I don't want to skip over the marriage part either, right? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that think they need to get married or remarried because they're lonely, or they just want to get married for the wrong reasons. And we all hear that. Sounds cliche, but the reality is all these checks that we're talking about to keep you away from divorce are also the checks you need when you're finding a partner. Because these issues that and you hear your family and friends talk about, they come up in almost every marriage. And there's reasons why they have that premarital counseling. There's reasons why you think about these issues. churches have these premarital counseling where you go in and you ask the tough questions about life insurance and sharing finances and kids and whether they're going to go to this church or that church. They ask those tough questions so you can see the reaction. And I think we live in this world where we're so afraid to be direct, or we just don't want to deal with direct because we've got so many other distractions that we don't do it. So before we get to the divorce thing, I would say start with the same questions if you're in the process of thinking about getting married. Number one, that's huge. And then, how do you know when it's bad enough to pull the trigger? I've never had to tell a client you need a divorce, ever. I often will say, hey, is this really a thing that you can't fix after 25 years of being with this person? Irreconcilable differences are you're just out of love, right? Whatever causes that, I don't know. I think that there's plenty of ways to get back in love if you're out of love and you're not having these bigger trigger points. But for sure, when it comes to spring cleaning and pulling the trigger, to your question, you need to make sure that when you have these accountability matrix and they're not being met, when you've talked to counselors, when you've talked to an attorney, and you've gone through all the things that are already a pain, and you're getting nothing back, and you've done your self-assessment, I have people literally, I'll do a consult, and a year and a half later, they'll call and say, hey, I'm ready.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. It's not the spur of the moment decision. I agree.
Yeah.
It has to be, if you feel bad, then you have to try, that's the better and worst piece, you have to try everything in your power. Even if the other party is not doing anything, try everything in your power to save it. But if you don't, like you said, if you don't see any work on the other side, then at some point, but I always say, like, it's the grass is not greener on the other side. So if you don't do a self-assessment, the next relationship you're going to get in, guess what, it's going to be the same thing. Because there's part of that, I think, in marriage failing, there's both parties have something to, unless you deal with somebody that's an addict or whatever, then there's not much you can do. But all the other issues, they don't come overnight and they will not go away overnight.
Yeah, I think on the feeling piece, I firmly believe that feelings are a product of what's happening around you. Sometimes they're just a notion that goes through your head. I mean, you hear it all the time, it's all in your head. And there are so many studies on the fact that it's all in your head, right? And so I really hope that if we're trying to really do some internal analysis, we think about how to get outside of our head and ask people the tough questions that are really close to you. I think that he or she is this way. What is your perception of me? Like, give me the raw. I'm not going to not be friends with you. I'm not going to not be your son. What is your real perception of me?
Get the German version.
And skip the freaking BS. Like, and don't get your all butthurt, whatever I can't say that.
Yeah.
Don't get your feelings all hurt because somebody tells it to you raw that you've asked them a question. Like, that's what you need to hear sometimes. And I need to hear it. We all need to hear it. We're human beings.
And I think always, that's always, and I tell my kids the same thing, is you dealing as a girl, you have a guy, or vice versa, the guy has a girl. Ask the other gender also for a little bit for advice. Because when we girls talk, we tend to go a certain direction. That's not necessarily how a guy thinks. So did you get some advice also from the other gender? Did you ask your brother? Did you ask your father? Somebody like that? And then maybe they have a totally different perspective. And what you're complaining about is just like, what? So I think that's very important to get input from other people. But you have to have people around you. And hopefully you have that people surround yourself with that are honest with you and will not just speak what you like to hear. In those situations, I think divorce, it's very important that you have honest and straightforward. And you might not like what you get to hear, but if they tell you constantly the B word, then maybe you're part of the big picture and the reason that this is going down south.
Right. So, any final thoughts on this topic today?
I think the topics, the big ticket, like Justin said, addiction, abuse, and infidelity are huge things. So it's harder to get around those big ticket items. If it's other things, like you said, falling out of love, can you not fix it? You were in love at some point. Maybe go back to those times you were in love. If you have kids, you should try even more harder than when you don't have kids. I think because you have other people involved, they will get affected by your decision. But the big ticket items, I don't know. You've seen this many times. Big ticket items. I don't know, if you have somebody that has an addiction, you can support, but at some point,
You have to love yourself enough to.
Yes.
You got to remember the zebra that you married and don't try to change all the stripes. I think that you also have to address it real time. And when someone makes progress, don't keep going backwards with them. Like if they make progress and they may retread a little bit, it's okay. Like it's part of who you married. You knew that person was a party animal when you married them. They're not just going to all of a sudden stop being that social person. Or if they were very meek and mild, they're not just going to.
And that's what you loved about him. That's
and
what
you
I
loved
mean.
it.
That's what you
like
loved at
me,
the beginning.
Rah, rah.
Yeah,
You
I agree. Because you loved, that's what you loved about the person. So don't try to change them now, years later, and said, I don't love you, what he said, party animal. That's why you fell in love with the party animal, because it was something different that you were.
Let's just dial it back a little bit. And then also not expecting you're supposed to be perfect either. I think that's, I look at myself when I was first married, I had a lot less patience because I wanted things a certain way and I was expecting perfection. And I didn't get perfection, but I got a lot of wonderful things, So, I mean,
You're pretty
I think
perfect, Mary.
Well, yeah, whatever.
I've yet to find any flaw.
Oh, well, let's start a list. But I think for people that are newly married and they're frustrating and they're frustrated with their partner, it's like you have to cut them some slack too, and know that you're not perfect either.
And you come to the table with a history. I mean, when you meet your significant other, you both come. You only know what you know. You come to the table with whatever the family you grew up in, the values that were installed in you, and there's a totally different person. So
that's so true.
They have to, and this is not gonna always be the same. Like I'm from a different country, different culture. We do things that Americans don't do. So having an American husband there's things that are off. And you have to find that way. I mean, if you have to learn about the other side.
And I love the concept of quarterly assessments.
Mm-hmm.
We do them in business. We talked about New Year, New Me, spring cleaning. That's 1 quarter. You can't just go all these things, all of life, and then just now I'm done.
10 years later, yeah.
Just kind of check in every quarter. Be like, hey, man, we had a great couple months together. What are some of your favorite things about it? Write them down.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Go back through the pros as much as the cons. Hey, we didn't do this. What can we do next quarter? I don't want to make it like a business, but hell, if you're going through struggles, make it like a freaking business. Every good business meets monthly, quarterly, weekly, and they go through the assessments.
And you can
expect what you inspect,
and you can steer it back on the tracks without it going.
That's right.
Derailing if you have those check-ins. I like that idea.
Yeah, just don't let it get that far. So if you live in Texas and you would like to speak to attorney Justin Sisemore and his team, you can call 817-336-4444 or visit lawyerdfw.com. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.